Well, hello, and welcome again to my series here on presenting to the AFCC in 2017, the Association of Family and Conciliation Courts, whatever, the AFCC, with Dorsey Pruder. Now, if so, in the first segment, I talked about the reasoning for presenting to the AFCC, which was to document their participation in the cover up of the unethical practices within forensic psychology. And then that would entail their participation in the psychological abuse of children and the psychological abuse of their parents using the children as weapons. And so that's what I did. We need documentation on this stuff because no one's going to believe me going in. I knew what was happening from about 2008 to 2010. I just spent figuring out what was going on over here. I'm trained to do that out of my master's program. You know, you kind of go in and look at all the systems and where's the problem. And the problem is there is no professional competence. You're getting misdiagnoses, and the parental alienation doesn't exist, and there's no applied knowledge. And so you have ethical violations in 2.01 boundaries of competence and 2.04 bases for scientific and professional judgments. 2.03 maintaining competence is also in there. And because they're not competent, then they're also in violation of 9.01 bases for assessment. So I'm looking at four ethical violations right off the top with everybody, and then failure in their duty to protect because they're misdiagnosing the pathology. And oh my goodness, that's a bad situation. How did it ever get this way? Well, who's responsible for ensuring ethical standards? Licensing boards. They're not doing. Why aren't licensing boards fulfilling their obligations? Because they're considered as forensic psychology is considered a subspecialty. So all the complaints about unethical malpractice from parents that go into the licensing boards get shunted over to other forensic psychologists who are all doing the same thing. So it's a massive cover up for the ignorant, incompetent malpractice because the licensing board is infected with the forensic psychologists who are the pathology. They're infected with the pathogen. So the pathogen has essentially gotten itself into the mental health system and is disabling the mental health system's response to the pathology. So, and it's doing the same with the AFCC, who should be like the professional organization developing the knowledge and doing so. Instead, they're going off into their own exploitation, financial exploitation of parents, solving nothing. They're then all the forensic evaluators are in violation of 2.01 because none of them know how to assess for delusional thought disorders, and that's what the pathology is. So all of them are in violation of 2.01 boundaries of competence. All of them are in violation of 2.04 because they didn't apply any established knowledge of delusional thought disorders, family systems, complex trauma, personality disorders. They applied no knowledge. I come over here, only thing they're applying maybe is parental alienation, which is a made up thing that doesn't really exist. And then they fight about it over and over. And some people say, yes, it does. And other people say, no, it doesn't. And that's the purpose of that. Parental alienation keeps everybody in conflict forever. The pathology, what I call the pathogen, produces these things. It generated the Gardner PAS people. They don't realize it, but they're a symptom of a trauma pathology. And this trauma pathology generated the forensic psychologists. They don't realize it, but they are a symptom of the pathology. And I can explain exactly how and why. I'm hoping to be able to do that in 2024 in Seattle. When the APA convention comes to Seattle, I would like a presentation where I just go meta on all of this. And I don't talk about what's actually happening. So I might go try to apply to a different division where I just explain what happened. How does a pathology create forensic psychology? How does a pathology create the Gardner PAS experts? They think they're coming up with their own stuff. No, they've actually been generated by a pathogen. And when I talk about the pathogen, just to be clear on its definition, when I say pathogen, I am talking about a specific set of damaged information structures in the attachment networks of the brain. And this particular damaged set of information structures was damaged by trauma. So the trauma comes in and damages these information structures in the person's attachment networks as a child. And so the attachment networks have a particular characteristic pattern associated with them from the imprint of the trauma. And this pattern will then replicate itself in future situations in sort of a psychological effort to heal itself. It's trying to reenact the trauma with variations to be able to work through the damage in the attachment networks. But because it's a constellated set of damaged information structures, it produces a characteristic set of patterns. So this is a pathogen that produces a type of pathology. And then once you recognize the patterns, it's easy to recognize the pathology or the pathogen that's creating it. So this is most definitely a public health issue. It's both a psychological issue and a public health issue. It's a trauma pathogen that's creating trauma, and it's in a lot of brains, and it's responsible in its different variations for the terrorist mind, for violence, some of the violence that we see associated with trauma and wars and kind of stuff like that. It's a narcissistic, borderline dark personality pathogen. So any of the stuff that's being developed or influenced by narcissistic, borderline, and dark personality pathology has a variant of this pathogen. So 2017, just finished writing Foundations, describing everything in detail across within 3 levels and across all levels to be really clear on Foundations and what I accomplished with Foundations. I provided a description of the pathology across 3 separate domains of analysis, starting with the family systems domain. I described what it is from using those constructs. Then I went to the personality disorder domain and described the pathology using those constructs. Then I went to the attachment system and described the pathology using those constructs. Then I linked the 3 and described how the attachment pathology produces a personality disorder pathology and how the personality disorder pathology produces a family systems pathology. There is no way I can create such an integrated model for the pathology if it is not accurate. And it's not me. I'm applying knowledge. And so the knowledge of attachment and personality disorders and family systems explains what the symptoms are and what's happening in the family. So that should be just enough by itself to just have everybody go, oh my goodness, Dr. Childress has explained it. Let's all start using this ABPA. But they didn't. And the Gardner people didn't because they want to be experts. And if they actually acknowledged that I had solved the pathology, then I'd be the expert and they wouldn't get to be the expert. And they wanted to be the expert so bad because they're not really experts in anything. They're not experts in attachment or personality disorders or delusional thought disorders or family system. They're not experts in anything. But they want to be experts. So the only way they can be experts is if they make stuff up. And so they had this wonderful little thing, parental alienation. And when I come along and said it doesn't exist, they go, oh no, we don't take our parental alienation from us. So they have been actively obstructing efforts to get the solution in place, efforts to get applied knowledge, because they don't want people to apply knowledge. They don't want this fixed. Because once it's fixed, they don't have a job and they go away and nobody cares about them. And if everybody's listening to Dr. Childress, nobody listens to them. So they're kind of a low-level professional. I have serious concerns about the quality of their character. But I'll let all that sort of reveal itself over time. I'll have another series of talks where I can talk about my encounters with Bill Burnett and like we met in Venice. We met, I think, in Washington too. We met in Venice, a big dinner with Dorsey Pruder and some other people, where I offered a collaboration on a couple journal articles, and he said no. That any solution that he would require that it included parental alienation syndrome, and that's just a non-starter. So no, if you require parental alienation syndrome as the foundation for your solution, then no, there's no foundation for collaboration because that doesn't exist and it's unprofessional, it's unethical, and it's just really problematic. So that was interesting. And interestingly too, after he told me that no, he doesn't want collaboration unless I accept parental alienation syndrome. So I said, okay, that's not going to work. So then I said, well, would you at least release the parental alienation study group to advocate in favor of the petition to the APA? And he said, no. The parental alienation study group isn't an advocacy group; it's just a study group. He said that, and Dorsey's sitting right there. You can verify this. I was just floored. No, you're not going to advocate for change. You're just going to study. Oh, he uses the group for advocacy when it's advocating for parental alienation syndrome. He's not going to use it, the voice of the PASG, for advocating for anything other than parental alienation study group. You want a good example of projection? Then they started to accuse me with ABPA of Dr. Childers thinks he is the only one who can solve this. Well, yeah, because I did. But yeah, that's actually projection from you. You're the one that's requiring only one solution. I say, if you've got knowledge, bring it. If you come with different knowledge that solves it in a different way, great. Let's bring knowledge. Okay, so it's not my solution, it's the application of knowledge. And that opens up into all the future. In the future, everybody can participate. It's not me, it's apply established knowledge. But I got off on the PAS experts, see how everything kind of relates over here. So I was, because you have two groups, PASG people who should have supported ABBA. When they saw that I had accurately diagnosed this, they should have given me access to their journal, the American Journal of Family Therapy. I tried to get in, but they banned it. No articles from Dr. Childress to the American Journal of Family Therapy. So I was shut down from their journal. And then I'm shut down from the forensic journal because they're not going to want to hear what I say. So I've had no outlet into the professional community. And because the Gardner people totally ignore me and have never mentioned my name in any of their articles, in any of their discussions, and nothing. I'm like a big black hole in terms of their discussion. Because of that, they didn't alert the forensic psychologists that I'm here. That would have given the forensic psychologist a chance to integrate my work and get prepared. So now when I wind up hitting the forensic psychologists, they are totally unaware I even exist. And that was a failure of the Gardner people who had a professional obligation to acknowledge what I accomplished. And they're just being really petty about it. But if I challenge them about being really petty and saying, look, why aren't you like supporting? They're going to say, "Oh, it's not about you," and I'm going to get lost into fighting with the Gardner PAS people, which is their job. They're like skirmishers to keep everything in conflict, rather than the true focus, which is the forensic psychologists and the licensing boards and the infection of the forensic psychologists on the licensing board. The licensing boards are not infected by Gardner PAS people. Okay, there's none of the Gardner PS people on the licensing board. They're the forensic psychologists, and that's what's disabling the ethical standards over here. We got to get a cleanse on the licensing boards to hold people accountable. That's when we get the forensic psychologists out. Everybody's reviewed by a clinical psychologist. And so if you're not meeting the standards, the highest standards of clinical psychology, then you're a problem. I don't care whether you're working in family courts or you're working with ADHD or autism. I don't care what you're working with. You need to meet the APA ethics code and the highest standards of professional practice as a clinical psychologist. So no separate special groups of psychologists just for you. So went back to the AFCC 2017 to document them and take Dorsey Pruder back with me. And part of the reason, two reasons for taking Dorsey Pruder back. One is to kind of irritate the pathogen, because I know if I'm sitting around Dorsey Pruder, the pathogen's going to want to get me gone. It's going to try to attack me. And so that's exposing it. Okay, so that allows me to expose like some of the flying monkeys. I got to expose Gene Mercer. from hanging around Dorsey. Uh, Although Jean Mercer kind of appears to have triggered on just my use of the word attachment. She doesn't think I know anything about attachment, and that she does. She knows it better than I do. So she's going to be an interesting little series of discussions as well. But the other two features. So I put in those 4 slides to document the AFCC for now, basically. And then I took Dorsey with me, and we shared the protocol. We told them what she does, and we told them how she accomplishes what we do. So again, due diligence on our side that they now failed to respond to. So all of you folks in the family courts think I'm over here doing one thing. You think I'm trying to lead a movement or trying to build my career. No, look at me. I'm an old guy. I'm not trying to build my career. And you see me doing one thing, and that's not what I'm doing. Okay? That's not what I developed as the approach off of my sort of task analysis from 2008 to 2010. Once I figured out everything that's wrong, I actually put you on a treatment plan with like bullet points and stuff. It's not written; that's kind of in my head, but I got you on bullet points on a treatment plan because that's what I do for a living. I'm a psychologist. If I was a dentist, I'd be taking your teeth out, but I'm not. I'm a psychologist, so I put you on a treatment plan. I wanted to put your kids on a treatment plan for the child abuse, but I can't get to the kids in the child abuse because the forensic psychologists are in the way. They are participating and using their power to participate in the psychological abuse of the children, which to me is phenomenally bad, but it's happening. The psychologists are the child abusers. So, because of that, I could not develop a treatment plan for your children's child abuse. Instead, I had to develop a treatment plan for you, the parents, to treat your traumatic grief, to treat your PTSD trauma. And the treatment for traumatic grief is to restore the parent child attachment bond. So now, if we get the parent child attachment bond fixed, then we get the child's um, psychological abuse ended. So I came at it from a different route into the situation from the parent rather than the child because I couldn't get to the child. So part of my everything I'm doing is documenting all the participants in your abuse. So starting with the AFCC, they're the professional organization. They're the ones that should stop it. Other thing that I'm doing with the AFCC is I am splitting them. Everything is about splitting right now. It's the poles with no middle, and so I'm doing that. I'm driving that splitting into the polarities and pole extremes with no middle, and um, so I'm dividing the AFCC on 2 levels. First, the forensic psychologists from the attorneys. So the family attorneys are all going to want to hear what I have to say about a new treatment approach to the court and a treatment argument rather than a custody argument made to the court. You want a proper risk assessment. So the whole set of legal arguments and legal package that's going to be presenting to the court is going to be changing from custody to treatment. I think all the family law attorneys in the AFCC would want a presentation from me on what that means and what those orders are and how to do that, a treatment approach rather than a custody approach. But I'm not presenting to the AFCC because of the forensic psychologists that they're there. And so that's going to be a division. Forensic psychologists won't want me presenting because I expose their unethical malpractice and negligence and get their license kind of stuff. And the attorneys in the AFCC who want me to present and want my information. The second level of splitting is I'm splitting the forensic psychologists from those who are colluding with the child abuse and continuing to be ignorant and negligently incompetent to those who want to be competent and are going to join with Dr. Childress and ABPA and say, yep, Dr. Childress nailed it. We need to start applying the diagnostic checklist and parenting practices rating scale. So I'm going to divide the psychologists between pro-Childress and anti-Childress. So we got all sorts of levels of splitting going on. And what I want to point out to you in this segment is I know that. I've predicted all of this. I know what's going to happen. And so I've developed interventions that activate in different contexts as things, because the world changes. Things, in 2015 are not the same way they are in 2023. And so it's when things get to here that some of my previous work, will now start to activate, because I have foresight and planning ahead, and self-reflective insight and linear logical reasoning. So I know what the pathology is in the family courts. Plus, I'm competent with the pathology. So now, with that, let's shift over to the actual presentation, and some of the consequences that kind of arose from that AFCC talk.